Hi, Sydney. Welcome to In the Green Chair. Thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
The most important question is coming up first, and then we'll get into the less important ones. My question for you, Sydney, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, that question is always a fun one. Actually, if you ask my parents what I wanted to be when I was younger, it was a crossing guard. I loved spending time outside and getting to chat with people every day. So I thought that was the ideal job. So I was very disappointed to learn that that was not a career option for me long term. And after that, I never really had a solid career that I was aiming for. I wasn't one of those kids who always knew what they wanted to be or knew even what industry they wanted to get into. I've always dabbled in a lot of different subjects and a lot of different hobbies. And I think I've definitely carried that throughout my professional career as well, of never being really stagnant and always kind of being fluid and responsive to whatever was happening in my life at the time. I am currently a graduate student and research assistant at Lakehead University. I'm pursuing a thesis in a Master of Education program where I look at and research how complex climate emotions can be addressed by educators in the classroom. So, really exploring strategies, resources, and different approaches for how students can, or how teachers, sorry, could be responsive to their students' feelings about climate change and helping them navigate that so that they can better respond to the urgency of the crisis.
Hmm. So, why do you think that is a significant thing to be involved in 2023?
As educators, I think we have a responsibility to help our students understand the climate crisis, but also prepare them with the emotional resilience to deal with this reality so that we can move past the fear and the stagnation that comes from looking at climate change, which is an incomprehensible issue for most young people. I think it's really in the last 5 years that research has really highlighted the intensity of the problem. I think this idea that young people have been nervous about the future, I think every generation has had some, kind of crisis that they've looked to and have felt that way. And I think for us, it's really the last 5 years. But I know that there are people who have been working in this space for 20 plus years. So I don't think it's a new thing. I think it's just something that's coming to the forefront of our attention because of how bad it's getting and how severe the mental health crisis is for our young people. Not just about climate change, but really just in general. They're dealing with a lot more than most generations have in the past, and so I think just it's been highlighted more in about the last 5 years.
Definitely, definitely. Well, you made a really good point. Like it's not a new concept to be worried about the future and the impact that industries are having on the world that we live in.
I think folks from around the world are really kind of coming together to conduct research and build on what's been done. So it's happening quickly, and hopefully, out of all of this research, then policymakers and educators can use this information to really enact change and hopefully support young people, but also the rest of us who are also struggling with this crisis. Kind of move forward and find new ways to navigate a crisis that we've had for a while, but are just kind of coming to terms with, I think.
Absolutely. You spoke previously about finding hope and how that is not an easy thing to do. How do you find hope and how do you help others find it?
Oh, that's a really good question, and something I would say I'm still navigating. I would say I still find times where I fall into despair. I do a lot of reading, a lot of podcasts, which I think that's where I find a lot of hope. I know Dr. Ellen Kelsey out in BC has a book called Hope Matters. And that was kind of the first book that introduced me to this concept of constructive hope. I think also recognizing prior to doing research in this area, I didn't realize that that you could hold hope, but still be upset and worried and afraid of the future, that those two things can be held simultaneously. And I think that realization for me allowed hope to thrive a little more. Because sometimes I would think, well, I'm obviously not hopeful because, I'm really afraid of this, or I'm really feeling down about this. But in reality, I can feel both of those things. And I'm really lucky that I get to work in a space, even with you folks, learning about all of the amazing things that you're doing to move things forward, whether it's through technological innovations or reskilling and retraining folks for the energy transition. I know I've talked to a lot of teachers who are doing incredible things in the climate education space, and I think that for me is hopeful to hear about and see those pieces and pockets of transformative change happening, and knowing that, hey, we might not be where we want to be, but we're further ahead than we were 10, 15 years ago, and we're heading in the right direction. And I think that gives me hope. And I'm not somebody who sees the world through rose-colored glasses, but I have to believe that there is a greener pasture on the horizon, and that we will get there eventually. I think if you don't hold that hope, then you're going to be really sad all of the time, and I just think that's not it's not conducive to the action that we need. And so I try and just hold those emotions simultaneously. And for me, I find a lot of that hope in the work of other folks.
You are currently reading a book. What book are you reading?
Oh, yes. It's called All We Can Save: Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis. And it's basically a collection of essays, poems, and written works by a number of female climate leaders, from youth to researchers to policymakers, to folks on the ground who are working to build resilience in their community. And they talk a lot about different solutions for the climate crisis, different ways to frame your mind when you're approaching these issues, the value of community and building that sense of resilience as a collective group. And so it's a beautiful book. I think there are lots of things I've taken from it. Actually, this was borrowed from a professor of mine who is acting as a support for me as I find hope. And I think having a community where you can talk about these emotions and these feelings with other people, not only to validate that they are okay, but also to recognize that you aren't alone, and you don't have to navigate them alone, and that there are a multitude of solutions. So yeah, I would highly recommend it.
When did that connection spark for you?
I think as an educator, I really struggled to not bring my own pessimism about the climate crisis into my teaching, and have that project onto students. And so when I was talking with students about climate change, I find I would almost dance or tiptoe around certain issues that I was concerned would bring out my true feelings or my true emotions about the topic. And it wasn't until later that I realized that, hey, maybe it would be good for me to talk about that, but also for young people who are feeling that. And that stemmed from research when I was looking into, okay, how can I go about having these conversations with young people and having these conversations with educators who are worried about the same thing. And the research really talks about being really open about those feelings and making space for them in the classroom. And so that's when I began to see, okay, how could I incorporate this in? And for me, it started with the arts, and looking at how we can kind of use that as an avenue to express ourselves. And since then, it's grown to looking at more hopeful futures, for example, and how can we incorporate that into our everyday learning and teaching, so that we always have these different versions of our future, and students aren't always, I guess, reverting to the future's on fire, the present is on fire. It's just doom and gloom from here on out, that they actually can envision an alternative future. And so it really came out of an insecurity of mine as an educator, not feeling comfortable and confident to be able to have these conversations. But my knowledge really comes from what's coming out of the research and what's coming out of thought leaders in this space.
It's so beautiful. The phrase "different versions of our future" is something I've never heard before, and I think that that's so hopeful. That just gave me a little A little pebble of hope. That's so beautiful. Different versions of our future. Wow. So you spoke about the way that teachers deal with their students having this climate anxiety, these climate emotions, and what that can look like in the education system.
Oh, that's a great question. I think before we can even transition to start talking about incorporating emotions in a meaningful way in the classroom, I think teachers first need to feel confident in delivering climate change education, which I think we're getting there, and it's coming along, but it's been a slow process, and not all teachers are at a place where they feel they can effectively deliver that education, particularly because a lot of our schools are based on a siloed subject system. So it's very hard to talk about a problem that is very complex and multidimensional when we're in these siloed subjects of this is math and this is science and this is geography. And so I think there needs to be some level of collaboration among educators first about how we deliver climate change education. And then kind of that concept of it takes a community to raise a child. It also takes a community of educators to help foster that resilience in students. And so it really needs to be coming from every subject, and it needs to be a lot of work on the teacher's end to discuss and talk about what's happening in each class and how we can use that to build knowledge and build resilience and talk about solutions from different angles so that hopefully students see these solutions and they don't fall into despair in the first place, so that we're not in a position where we need to pull them out. We're in a position where they already have the strategies, they already have the skills to navigate those before it even hits. And that needs to start early in education. But we really have to move towards a more holistic way in general of addressing climate change education if we're going to be successful in talking about emotions. Because I don't know about you, but my grade 10 data math class wasn't going to be a suitable place to start talking about how we feel. And so transitioning away from this idea that we are primarily knowledge based to more competencies is really needed, and that's happening in parts of the country. I know BC has a competency based curriculum. Ontario, of course, is a little bit slower to move, but there are a lot of advocates in this space who are calling for these changes. So it is happening, and hopefully in the future we'll see a more holistic approach to teaching that's really collaborative and supportive of students as people, not just as vessels for information.
I love that approach. That is incredible. Are you finding that there are people in opposition to that at all?
I think there are always going to be people who want to maintain the status quo. Of course, transitioning is not easy. It's a lot of work on the ground. It's a lot of emotional labor. It's a lot of relearning and reskilling as teachers. And for a system that hasn't changed in well over 100 years, it can be a shock, and change is always going to be hard. And I think there are always going to be folks who oppose. But I think when you get down to the nitty gritty of why we're making this transition, I don't think anyone could find justification as to why we don't need to move this way. I think the how is really stopping a lot of folks, and the fact that unfortunately education is provincially mandated. And so even if other provinces are moving forward, that doesn't necessarily mean that we are. And so it's slow, and there of course are there is opposition, but I would say they're louder but fewer than the advocates. So there are a lot of people in this space who are trying to make change, and a lot of teachers who, even if not on a systemic level, are working to make change just in their individual classrooms, and that's radiating out, and we're seeing the ripple effects of that. And it's just a matter of time before that gains even more momentum and moves up into system changes. But there are a number of, I know, policy researchers and educational researchers who are working in this space to see how can we move things forward and how can we do it at a quicker pace.
So can we chat a little bit about your experience with green learning? So you left your elementary school French teacher job and you went into, let me just see here. Yeah. Yeah. So you did a couple of other things. So you left your elementary school job, you did some education and public programming with the art gallery, and then you jumped into your role as an engagement manager with Green Learning. Can you explain a little bit about what your role was and what the significance of Green Learning is?
For sure. So maybe I'll start by just explaining a bit of what Green Learning is. So they're a national nonprofit who creates online resources, simulators to help educate young people about the green economy, energy, and the clean energy transition, circular economy. And so my role as the engagement manager was really to help support teachers who want to use these resources in their classrooms. Oftentimes incorporating environmental resources or environmental education is something new for a lot of teachers, and it can be a really intimidating space. There are countless resources and simulators out there, and it's sometimes it's hard to know where to begin or how exactly this resource fits into your classroom. And so my role was really supporting teachers in that capacity. So whether through one-on-one meetings or virtual classroom visits, or I did a lot of professional development, whether at teacher conventions or after school sessions, helping to educate teachers. Sometimes it's about the knowledge. So sometimes they needed, about a background or a foundation in climate science, or an energy 101 talk. But oftentimes it was looking at, okay, what are you doing in your classroom already, and how can this fit in a meaningful way? And just kind of talking through and helping them to collect resources and collect lessons that could create a comprehensive program.
It's such a huge topic, and for teachers who are already overburdened, who are already underpaid, to give them a way forward and to support them in such a way that they feel confident and informed is so wonderful and such a cool career path. Did you ever think that you would be able to, like, did you ever think that you would fit this kind of role?
I honestly didn't even know this kind of role existed. I was very naive in thinking that teachers went to school and did their Bachelor of Education and then were teachers for the rest of their lives. My grandfather was a teacher, and I never heard about these opportunities or that he was engaging in anything like this. And so it was all brand new to me. And I think these roles are something that's a little bit more emerging. I'm not sure if when I was even in high school, if that would have been an option of a career to look at. I definitely think once I heard about the role, I immediately thought, hey, that sounds exactly like me and what I'm interested in, and combines a lot of my existing skill sets. But it also allowed me to grow in new ways. I learned a lot about clean energy technologies, which is not something I think you come across in everyday learning. And so I was able to expand my own learning in other ways too. So all the pieces of the puzzle for that role really fit well with who I was and what I was looking to do, and allowed me to grow in a way that I didn't really anticipate, because I had never thought of a potential role like this. So all very new, but all very rewarding.
Definitely. In speaking with a couple of other people, a couple of the other people that we have for this podcast, there really seems to be a theme of this job didn't exist when I was in school, and I think that it's something that's really starting to explode is all of these different types of careers that you can have that either don't exist yet or can be changed from something that already exists to incorporate sustainability and environmental initiatives. And it just the world, yes, is in a place where we need to make some very dire changes, but there's also a ton of innovation that is on the way and already happening. And I think that young people, most definitely feeling the despair, are right in feeling that, valid in feeling that, but there really is some hope going forward.